Okay, so welcome everybody. I think I know almost all of you. Joanne Kelleher, I am the director of the Early Childhood Collaborative of Southington, and so this is our annual, except we skipped last year, State of Early Childhood presentation here in Southington. And so let me share my screen. And start the presentation. And so I just realized if I do that, I can't see who is needs to be admitted. So let me do it this way.
If you want to make me co-host, I could admit people for you.
That would work. Thank you. Excellent. One thing about like being one of the only people on staff besides Sierra at the ECCS is that I've never had to share like this. So, so here we go. So welcome everybody. We are recording this. There are people I know who have to get on or off earlier or later. So feel free to do that. Merrill, if you could share any questions that come up in the chat, that would be great as well.
Okay.
So first, I want to thank our funders, and I am expecting several of them to be on the call, but we are, our fiscal sponsor is the Community Foundation of Greater New Britain. We will be celebrating our 15-year anniversary with them coming up next October. So that is really exciting. And we just received news last night that the Connecticut Early Childhood Funder Collaborative has given us a grant. It's part 2 of a grant. So that was exciting news last evening. And especially thank you from our board members and members of the community. Here's a list of our current board members. I know that Rachel, Ryan, Pat, Shannon, and Brian are supposed to be on this call. So thanks to all of you. And I wanted to do some introductions. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute so that way all of you could introduce yourselves to each other. So let's start with the child care providers who are on the call. Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Robarge. I'm the Early Childhood Director at the Southington Cheshire Community YMCA.
Jacqueline.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline. I'm from My Little Rascals on North Main. I'm one of the owners.
In the schools, Mary. Yeah, and you got to take yourself off mute. There you go. So that was Mel. Try it again, Mary.
I am Mary Alexander from Southington Catholic. We have a pre-K 3 and 4 program here. Thank you.
Catherine.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Goralski. I am a coordinator of special education with Southington Public Schools, and I work with the preschool there.
Shannon.
Good morning, I'm Shannon Fitzsimmons. I am the director at the Family Resource Center located at Strong School, and I am also a current board member.
Chrissy.
Chrissy Cassesi, the Association Child Care Director for the Southington Cheshire YMCAs.
Mary Lynn.
Mary Lynn Osborne, Department Leader of Family and Consumer Sciences at Southington High School.
Let's see, moving on to Other community folks, Bill,
Hi, I'm Bill Palmieri. I'm the Deputy Chief with the Southington Police Department.
Angela.
Hi, everybody. I'm Angela Orsini-Gary. I'm a nurse practitioner at Southington Pediatrics in Southington.
Val.
Good morning, everyone. Valerie DiPaolo, currently a town council member, and happy to be on this morning.
Let's see, Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna Eyre. I'm the Executive Director of Bread for Life, and just passionate for children in our community.
Board members, we've got Ryan, who is double dipping.
Hello. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. So Ryan Howe, my wife and I actually own Bright Beginnings in Plantsville, and I'm also on the board of ECCS. So I certainly, care a great deal about the state of childhood in our region, and happy to be a part of any positive changes that come with it.
Excellent. Brian.
Good morning, Brian Williams, current ECCS board member. My wife and I live in Southington. We have a 3-year-old, and my wife teaches high school special ed in Cheshire.
Pat. Pat, who's on mute? Rachel, you're going to go next while Pat's unmuting. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. All right. So I'm Rachel Wardwell. I'm a realtor in town. I am a current board member and actually was just elected as chairperson. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to really dig into this, and I'm very excited about it. I also have a granddaughter who just is about to turn 5 and start kindergarten. So this has been a great opportunity for me to get more involved in early childhood activities in town.
Pat.
Yes, I have finally found the unmute button. I hope. And I'm an ECCS board member, and I appreciate being here. Thank you for all of you. Thank you, all of you, for your interest and appreciation for early childhood education.
Let's see. Steve Mcdancy.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you all for your efforts this year with our youngest learners in these most trying times. I'm sure it's been a challenge for many of you, as it was for us, but your efforts are truly appreciated. I'm Steve Mcdancy. I'm currently Assistant Superintendent, and on July 1st, I'll be assuming the role of Superintendent, and really excited about that and excited to hear about the state of early childhood this morning.
Welcome. Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Mcgurk. I'm the Assistant Superintendent in Berlin Public Schools. I'm part of the Community Foundation for Greater New Britain, and I learned about your good work from my colleague, Steve Mcdancy. So Joanne offered to let me hop on the call this morning and learn about some of the good things that are happening in Southington.
Excellent. Mary Lynn.
Hi, Joanne. I did introduce myself.
Okay. Sierra.
Hi, I'm Sierra Murray. I'm the marketing intern for the ECCS.
And after like 3 or 4 years, I guess we need to stop calling you the marketing intern and make you the marketing administrator. So a lot of the graphics and social media that you see happening is thanks to Sierra's assistance. I'm going to introduce Betsy, who is the newest person in the ECCS community. We have some new funding that requires us to solicit parent ambassadors. And so Betsy has agreed to be our parent ambassador, being the liaison to the new Connecticut Office of Early Childhood Parent Cabinet that is currently being set up. So thank you, Betsy, for that. Kate?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Kirkhart, and I'm with the Main Street Community Foundation. We're located in Bristol, but we serve Southington and 5 other towns. I oversee the various grant programs for the foundation, and we've been a longtime supporter of the Early Childhood Collaborative in Southington. And we also have funded, various preschools and other childhood initiatives in some of the other towns we serve, like Bristol, Plainville, et cetera. So I'm happy to be here and get the update on the current issues and trends in early childhood.
Excellent. So I think that's everybody. I will go back to sharing my screen. Move this over here. So thank you to the board members. We did that. So I'm going to talk a bit about our strategic plan, which, as I was putting this presentation together, I realized we had worked on right before the pandemic. I'm going to talk about some statistics and trends that I'm seeing at the town level. Oh, I forgot to introduce 2 people. Merrill Gay, who's going to be our guest speaker. And Barbara Vita. Barbara, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, Joanne. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Vita. I coordinate the Connecticut Children's Collective, which is the state's intermediary organization, which connects all of these wonderful local collaboratives with the OEC and the State Department of Ed's good works. So I'm really happy to be here this morning, Joanne.
And Erin, you should connect with Barbara because she can help with your work to set up a collaborative in Berlin. Did I miss anybody else? No. Okay. So Merrill Gay, who is the executive director of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance, is going to give some state and federal updates. We'll have a conversation and then we will wrap things up. So I am kind of a data geek, as Barbara knows, and I pulled data from lots of different places. Unfortunately, some of the data that I would really love to get answers to just doesn't exist yet. We're just going to have to wait years to see what some of the long-term impacts on the pandemic are on young children. But I've certainly talked to a lot of people, and I am hoping that all of you chime in with your insights and feedback too. So during our strategic planning, which we did between September of 2019 and February of 2020, thanks to funding from the Community Foundation of Greater New Britain and their capacity building initiative, we hired an outside consultant who met with the ECCS board. We did some surveying, we had a community conversation, and we confirmed as a board that our purpose is to enhance the quality of life and ensure that all children in Southington are healthy and ready to learn. We tweaked our target age. Most of the focus is going to be on birth through entry to kindergarten, but a lot of the resource sharing will continue for children right through school age, elementary school age. And so on the all children are healthy category, like who are these all children? And some of the trends that we identified during the strategic planning was that longtime residents see Southington as a solidly white middle-class community. But when really there's an increase in racial and ethnic diversity, one of the needs identified was an increase of number of students needing both English language services and at a higher level of services. There's an increase in poverty level, and there's an increase in number of children per household. So how many young children are there? This is the number of babies born per year. And you can see, even though the chart's kind of misleading, it's really been kind of flat the last 3 years. There were 371 born in 2020, 377 the year before, 379 the year before that. So all of these 371 who were born last year would have been conceived before the pandemic started in March. So I'm really curious to see what the 2021 number is going to be. And so when you add the last few years up, the 2014 to 2018 births, you get 1853 for the US Census, they think there's about 1917 for a 0 to 4-year-olds. And I want you to remember this decline right here, because these are the first graders, kindergartners, and incoming kindergartners, because that's a bigger decline. So race and ethnicity, these numbers are all from the state EdSite reports. And if you look back to 2007, 90% of the population was white, a total of 662 non-white students in Southington Public Schools. And if you look at October of this year, we've now dropped down below 80% white and almost doubled the number of students. So this is a definite trend here. I did every 3 years, so I thought that was really kind of interesting. And in each category, it's gone up as well. And so when you compare that overall town population, the Circtown profile for 2019, which is really a 3-year rolling average, says that 91.89 of the total town population is white, versus the same time period for the students, it's like between 83 and 85%. So this is where the perception is coming from. As far as English language learners, there is definitely an increase in students. This is for the whole Southington School District. We're up to 2%, 125 students as of last school year. And a survey that was done in 2017 said that the parents of children in elementary school speak 21 different languages. As far as the poverty piece, Alice is a report from the United Way that identifies households that earn more than the federal poverty level, but less than the basic cost of living. And you can see that in Southington, the percent that are above the Alice rate has gone up. I personally think that the Alice numbers, especially when you start to look at a family of 4, which is the way they define it, is misleading, because for their Alice budget, I've got my other laptop going here with my notes. For a family of 4 with 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler, the childcare cost for the year is assumed to be $1,707, which is about $142 a month, which is not even enough to pay for a part-time preschool program. And that assumes that the infant is not in care, because that would be $250, $300 a week.
I think there's something wrong there, because the Alice numbers, childcare is a big chunk of the Alice budget there. I would just.
Okay, maybe I was looking.
Yeah, I think you might be looking at monthly as opposed to annual or something there, because it should be like 26,000 for a family of 4 to have 2 kids in childcare.
Yeah, and that was my point, that I thought that the budget that I looked at, and maybe the Southington budget is different than the statewide budget, but it definitely was.
What was the amount there?
This may be an old number, but for a family of 4, annual income of 78,000.
Okay, it is old, because it's now 90,000.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a year out of date.
But the Southington United Way has not published a report since 2018. And I know that statewide there's like 2019 and 2020 numbers, but
yeah,
Southington is its own United Way organization. And so I could not find a more recent Alice report for our town. And certainly if you bump up the total income to 90, that would help towards the childcare, addressing the issue that I'm concerned about. Free and reduced lunch in the school district in 2008 was 7.5%. In 2019 was 24%. And depending on the school, some of the elementary schools, it's higher than that. 4 of the 8 elementary schools in Southington are considered Title I schools. So on the healthy side, this is where I really kind of opened my eyes when I revisited the strategic plan trends. So all of these trends were identified before COVID hit. So the number one was that mental health needs are increasing, anxiety, depression, understanding of trauma. There was a need for trauma-informed care and social and emotional learning, especially for childcare providers. And teachers for years, as Steve and I have discussed, have been seeing a decline in empathy and in self-regulation in the incoming kindergarten students. The second trend we had identified during our strategic planning on the health side was an increased dependence on electronic devices, which was impacting kindergarten readiness due to decrease in parents reading, a decrease in fine motor skills, and a decrease in gross motor skills. So as you can imagine, both of those trends only got worse. You know, we saw cases of COVID-19 illness in just about every childcare setting in town, as far as centers and nursery schools, some in the family providers. Definitely mental health issues around stress and anxiety, trauma, everybody remote learning for a while. And for the younger kids, really a lack of opportunity for socialization. I heard from many parents who were, you know, in their homes with their young children for months at a time. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of statistics here. I know this is really light, but 211 does track statistics. And so you can go out to 211 counts. And one of the biggest categories in town where there were requests for help, excluding the healthcare and COVID-19, because there were a lot of requests for helping to get vaccinations, was in the mental health category. And so in Southington, between May 12th of 2020 and May 11th of 2021, there were 294 calls to 211 for crisis intervention and suicide. 294. 271 for mental health services, 59 for substance abuse and addiction issues. Almost all of those needs were met. That's the far right corner. Only 2 to 3% of those needs were unmet. So I thought that was kind of striking. Bill, if you could chime in on these numbers, which I got from a conversation I was part of with you, I guess just last week.
Yeah, and I sent Joan an email because I was actually looking for the 20, I was looking at the 2020 numbers, so I had to adjust those. But if you're looking at overdoses with a 2020 number, we had 43 total overdoses in 2020, and our overdose deaths were 12 in 2020. And if we compare them to 2019 numbers, our overdoses in 2019 were 48 versus 43 in 2020. Our overdose deaths were 10 in 2019 and 12 in 2020. So there's an increase there. Unfortunately, when we look at our death by suicide rate, we were 3 in 2019 and we were 7 in 2020. So those numbers are trending. We do, like in 2020, if you look at mental health related calls, we handled 254 in 2020, and that trend is continuing into 2021. So I have to, the 50 mental health calls, it's actually half of that was in 2020 if you do the numbers. So that was an error on my map that I pulled. But we continue to run into a lot of people that need mental health services, and that's kind of where we've been focusing some of our change on and trying to get the officers better equipped to handle those. And we're working on some partnerships, hopefully, that are going to come to fruition that I think will up our ability to serve that population in town.
Thank you, because you know, the mental health of a young child is only as good as the mental health of the people that he or she lives with.
Joanne, could I ask a question just to clarify to Bill? Bill, when you say there were 50 mental health related calls per month, how do you define a call? Is that an incident? Or is that something that could be domestic violence? It could be children, it could be anything. What does that mean? Or is it a call just for help, for resources?
No, so actually that number should be a little more, should be down to 25 if we look at 2020 numbers. But the way we separate it out is we have a code that's called emotionally disturbed person. So that doesn't count domestics, that doesn't count other calls. That's where we respond to somebody because there's a mental health related call. And actually, when it initially comes in, we code it just for dispatching as a medical call. And then our officers go out there and then they will put it into the proper category. So we kind of have a two-step coding. One is the initial call just to be able to dispatch it, and then an actual call type so we can see. So yeah, if we were to add in our domestics and other stuff like that, you know, and one of the things we're finding out too, there's a lot of talk about, you know, should the police be involved in these types of calls? And, you know, society is asking us to do that. And we're in the community, we should be responding to these. And we respond to calls, you know, we got to try and get out in front of this, because we could go to a call once or twice and we're able to talk to the person and calm them down. But maybe the third or fourth time we end up having to commit them, or there could be some type of act of violence. And there's, you know, our focus is really trying to get some resources on the front end. So if I'm a family, like I have 2 children, my wife and I, so if I'm struggling with my child with some type of mental health related problem, is there a service I could go to start getting help before it rises to the level that you have to involve police or an ambulance or something like that? So, you know, we're truly committed to looking at trying to do that. And we reached out to some stakeholders in the community, and that's kind of our focus, is to try and not only get, you know, a reactive response, but let's try to get some proactive responses and some services.
Thanks, that's very helpful.
Thank you. So Kate, you mentioned domestic violence. So I got these statistics from the Prudence Crandall Center, which does cover domestic violence issues in this area. And so the top line is from April 2019 through March of 2020. And the bottom line is the following year during COVID. And so the number of adults and children served went up from Southington, and the number of units of service, which could be court advocacy, sheltering, counseling, safety planning, info and referrals, also went up. So I've heard, you know, stories from people about students who are literally afraid to leave their house to go back to school in person. I've heard stories about very young people walking down the sidewalk with their parent yelling at a passerby that they don't have their mask on. I have heard a whole variety of stories. And so I wanted to kind of open it up to all of you if there's any other health insights that you want to add, especially if you are in the healthcare field, or you're dealing with children on a day-to-day basis. Angela, I know I saw Dr. George at a meeting, Scarvinko, and he was very concerned about some of the mental health issues of children.
Joanne, I just noticed this morning there was an article in the Connecticut Mirror about the burgeoning mental health problem. I didn't get to read it or print it out, but I did see that in the headline. So it just underscores that this seems to be what everybody is talking about. It takes many shapes and forms, but, and I know Dr. George in particular has been a big advocate of, we need more services for the school kids. It's great that they're doing the ruler initiative, the social emotional initiative, and I think that's really helping, but they need more. Everybody needs more. That seems to be what I hear as a funder. Our requests for mental health type programs and mental health supports have definitely gone up in the last year. And that seems to be part of every community committee that we sit on. That seems to be front and center of that discussion.
Yeah. Joanne, I can speak to this a little as well. We're servicing, and, one family who is, their children have not left the house at all. And the mom will come and pick up, our to-go meals for her family. And they are just so paralyzed by fear. And we had a long discussion yesterday, when she picked up, and she's got one student not in this age range, one going to middle school and one going to high school. And they literally can't even go out. I mean, maybe to their yard, but not anywhere past their own little yard. And she's very afraid about sending them back to school in the fall, paralyzed really. And so it really brought the situation home to me to see just how much in fear some people are living. And it's frightening. And then, of course, that's being transferred to the children, of course. And I think they're also so afraid of the world outside their home. And something that we definitely need to be sensitive to, and then in a long-term plan, to address for sure.
Right. I see that Rhea Highsmith from Hartford Healthcare joined us. Do you have any thoughts about what you're seeing in the community?
Hi, Joanne. Thoughts. Well, as far as the mental health, we have been getting quite a few requests for services from our behavioral health director for mental health talks, education. That's across all of the communities that we serve. So we've been pretty much connecting them to do Zoom seminars, educational insights and different things to help support the community. As far as children, I have not gotten very many requests for kids in general, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And Jess Collins, who is our behavioral health director, has been really, really supportive and has been doing a lot of educational talks in that area. If there's opportunity for me to connect her with you, or if you need any additional resources, I'm happy to make that connection.
Okay, thank you. I know that we have a program called the Early Childhood Consultative Partnership, and I've been in touch with the person who covers Southington. She's come to many of the provider calls that I've been holding, and she is definitely seeing an increase in requests for her services. Anything else on the health side? As I said, I would love to get my hands on some good data, but it's just not there yet. And Steve, I have to say, I was so disappointed that the town council voted to cut the Board of Education budget because I know many of those, many of that funding was to go for school counselors and other mental health supports. So that was very disappointing.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. If I could just add a few things too before we transition in terms of the health piece. Yeah, as far as the budget goes, it's, as I call it, it is what it is, right? And so obviously, it's not what we had hoped as an outcome, but we will pivot and adjust. The mental health staff that was included in our original proposal will still be added, and we will be using the ESSER 3 grant funds to do that. And so our work will be partnering with town officials over the next several years to try and phase those staff permanently into the operating budget. And so that's a plus, and I want people to know that staff will still be coming, just in spite of the cut. The other piece, and this speaks a little bit to what Donna touched upon, which will be very difficult for families, is as a district, we do not plan on offering a remote learning option next year. Pretty much following suit with what all districts are doing around us, and in accordance with guidance from both the state and also Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. Our position is that in-person learning allows for the opportunities for socialization and access to the mental health staff that we have. And so we believe that that's in the best interest of our students. We've always had options for students that need a remote option, like our medically fragile students or students that are homebound for various reasons. That's not something that was solely due to the pandemic. We've offered that prior to, and that will still be an option for families that need that for those specific reasons. In terms of, and I heard we talked a little bit about ruler, and I do think that was an advantage that we had going into the pandemic, that we were already addressing emotional intelligence with our students prior to the pandemic. So we had a head start in that realm, but we also had done some work with our staff, particularly our support staff, social workers, counselors, school psychologists around trauma-informed instruction. So that is training that will be, again, it's already done, it's occurred, but it'll be important to apply now as we start to assimilate back to an in-person environment for students that may have experienced trauma during the pandemic. And so that's another part of our ESSER 3 planning. Once we make that document public in a few weeks and look for feedback from the community, what you'll see is assimilation opportunities for youth over the summer to try and ease a lot of that anxiety that families may be experiencing around an in-person return. So we kind of have a lot of irons in the fire right now and trying to pivot out of this and into an in-person school year next year. But I do think we're positioned fairly well. In spite of the recent budget cuts, we should be able to do what we can for our students.
Could I ask a follow-up question to Steve? Hi, Steve. Kate Kirkhart from Main Street. I'm just curious, we've been hearing so much about the American Rescue Plan and the funds that are coming down, and we know that both the cities and the schools are getting separate allocations. I know more about Bristol because that's where we're located, but for instance, we heard that like the schools in Bristol are getting 20-something million dollars. Are you aware of any money coming down that's targeted for the mental health needs of kids? Is that part of the plan?
Yes, that is one of the qualifying expenses, if you will. There's certain priorities and initiatives that have to be addressed for use of those plans. Mm-hmm. And so that is part of it in terms of supporting the students coming out of the pandemic. And so ours, we did not get 25 million, we got 4. We spent over 3 years. So, you can imagine even with the staff itself that we were already planning on adding prior to the pandemic, and even knowing about the ESSER 3 funds coming over 3 years, that'll be almost $1 million in itself.
That's great.
And 20% of those ESSER 3 funds have to be designated specifically to learning loss and academic recovery. So of that 4 million, approximately, there's a good, and we have the ESSER 2 funds as well. There's a decent chunk of that that's spoken for before we even look at how we might offset some of our operating budget expenses with mental health staff using the grant money. So it's a little bit of a shell game at this point. The only plus is that we have 3 years to spend it. So I think hopefully that's what I alluded to before. That allows us to maybe gradually phase those support staff back into the operating budget as we had originally proposed over time. So the impact to the town and the taxpayers is minimal each year. But I did have a good conversation with Dr. George, Kate,
yes.
and about how to maybe develop a more sustainable and comprehensive mental health support system for our students. And so, yeah, at some point we'll be circling back around to you guys to talk about that.
He did mention that to me, so I'm sure we'll connect offline about that in the future.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
The topic of being trauma informed came up, so I just wanted to share that I have a copy of this movie Resilience that the Early Childhood Collaborative owns. If anyone would like to borrow it, it's really a powerful look at how childhood trauma impacts brain development. So this is in the ECCS Lending Library. Anything else on health before we move on to the or prepared for school piece? Okay. So moving on. So we do have a focus on getting children ready for preschool. I realized I had not asked Steve's office for the latest preschool experience numbers, but the trend here in Southington is that usually when children show up, they are fairly prepared for school. But with the pandemic, there were concerns about children not showing up for this current school year. And so when we looked at those numbers in the 2019-2020 year, there were 453 kindergarten students within the district. For this current school year, there's 428. So we're only down by 25. And when you looked at that chart, the very first chart we looked at, there were 13 fewer babies born in town that year. So, you know, the concerns I was hearing from parents last summer, should I send my child to kindergarten? Should I keep them back another year, which legally they can do? The numbers show that most of them showed up. So I thought that was positive. Steve's looking through his chart. Do I have my numbers right?
Oh, you do. I'm just checking to see if we have any updates since then.
And so as of a couple weeks ago, for the current registration for the kindergarten students who are starting in fall, there were 48 who had no preschool experience. So I know that both Shannon at the Family Resource Center is working on a special program targeted those families. And I know that new this year, the YMCA is offering one of their summer camps. They've opened that up for 3 to 5 year olds to try and catch up those children.
Joanne, as of May 20th, we have 381 registered for 21-22 school year.
381, so that's down. I do know that there are families who still have not completed the process, because I've gotten phone calls, or I literally had somebody at the Art of Yum. I was picking up some to-go food. She's like, I know your name. You're the early childhood person. She's like, how long before I have to register somebody for kindergarten? I'm like, well, orientation is happening now, so you should probably do it, but officially you have until August. They were struggling with getting to town hall to get the copy of the birth certificate. I had other people who were having issues with paperwork proving residency. So I know you're going to get at least a few more, but I'm not surprised to hear this number is down, because when you go back and look at that number of births, the incoming kindergarten class ties to that very low point, the 353 children born versus in the 370s. So, I mean, that could account for 20-ish kids right there. So around the early care and education field, before the pandemic, I had identified, and we had talked about during the strategic planning, that there was a crisis around space availability, staffing and regulations, caregivers working long hours for low wages, no benefits, and the high cost. So nursery schools, $146 to $310 per month, which is part-time, 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the age. Infants and toddlers are full-time care, costs a lot more than preschool care, preschool age care for full-time. And it's like paying tuition at UConn. And when your child is born, you've got 18 years to save up to pay for your kid to go to college. You don't have that luxury to save up to send them to childcare. There is a state program called Care for Kids, and I want all of you to encourage the families that you work with to make sure that they know about this program. It's for low to moderate income families. Currently, if working, they've expanded that. So if they're in training.
Not quite yet. Yeah, I'll give you an update on that part.
Right now, it's less than 50% of the state median income for a family of 4. The plan, and I didn't put any numbers in here because I know it's a moving target, is to increase that. And I'm sure that's going to be part of Merrill's update, although you can chime in right now if you want.
It will be going up to 60% of state median income. So for a family of 4, that'll take it up to around 70,000.
So I suspect that there's quite a few families who are kind of in that range. Also, anybody who is eligible for Care for Kids, the family fee portion is currently being waived by the state between April and September. So that means if there are any children like who could go to summer camp, because you can use Care for Kids for elementary school age children as well. And there are some programs in town that do accept Care for Kids for their summer program, not all of them. As of February, there were only about 100 Southington children who were enrolled in Care for Kids. So I really want you to encourage people to know about this. And certainly once the update increasing it to 60%, you will see Sierra and I working to get that word out through our channels. Licensed child care centers, there's actually good news here in Southington. Between 2019 and 2021, the total capacity in the town did go up. And that is really because there were a couple of centers that increased the number of classrooms that they had. My Little Rascals 2 on West Street opened like a whole second floor and has, they call it Baby Rascals. So that's where a good chunk of the under 3 came from. St. Dominic's opened another classroom. I believe Town and Country opened another classroom. So that was good news. We're now up to 5 licensed youth camps for the summer. And I think 2 years ago, we only had 3, maybe the 4th one had just signed up, but we just got a new one this year. And then the YMCA is licensed for before and after care at sites covering every school district, some at the school, some at their camp. So the ECCS does have a list of all the providers on our website. So Sierra, if you could pop that link into the chat, that would be helpful. On the other hand, the number of family child care providers is continuing to decrease. These are women-owned small businesses run out of their home. They're limited to 2 infants and up to 6 preschool age. And even though we currently have 24 licensed, I know of at least 1 who is in the process of closing. So that will be 23. And I know a couple of them are planning on retiring within the next few years. So these numbers will continue to go down. And we're seeing very few new people enter the family child care business. Nursery schools, so these would be part-day school year programs. Village Green and Zion are currently full with a waiting list for next fall and for now. YMCA Nursery School, Southington Catholic are all accepting applications. Southington Public Schools has an integrated preschool with special ed students and community peers. Last I knew, the 4-year-old program was closed with a waiting list, and there were a few spots left for the 3-year-olds. That's still true, Kathy? I don't know if she heard me. other preschool experiences, going back to the trying to get as many children in town to have a preschool experience before they show up for kindergarten. Family Resource Center is offering programs. They are currently post-COVID a mix of online and smaller classes. The Southington Libraries programs are currently all online, and hopefully they'll be opening some back up in the fall. Part of the issue is space. So putting on my director of the Southington Public Library hat, I have to excitedly say that as of last night, the Southington Town Council voted to move forward the process to build a new library at a cost of $16.9 million on the current site. There's a couple of steps, but the plan is to do some public hearings and then send it off for a referendum for a vote for November. So as part of that planning committee and the advocacy committee, there was a big push for a large children's and teens department. Like the whole second floor is going to be for the kids and families. So that was really exciting news last night. And certainly once that new library is up and running, there will be dedicated program spaces just for children. So all of that was happening before the pandemic. With the pandemic, additional health concerns for staff and family. Childcare providers were restricted on class size. There were cohort limitations. There were cleaning requirements. There was increased financial pressure. These essential workers who are part of our community infrastructure really struggled. And so I put out a survey, and of the 10 center and nursery school providers who responded, 7 of the 10 are currently hiring, and they are really having a tough time finding staff. Many of them have been looking for a long time. Many of the staff who apply are not qualified. People book an interview and don't show up. People agree to start and then don't show up. And this is a state and a national issue. And I'm sure that will be woven into part of Merrill's conversation about the reasons why. The providers who responded are seeing behavioral issues, so no surprise there, and financial issues. And then concerns of the business or the staff have to do with stress, the impact on children, vaccine hesitancy of either staff or the families. The minimum wage increase is a big issue, and the financial viability of their business. So those were the top concerns. And so Ryan was going to share a little bit about what he is dealing with. And if there's any other childcare provider who wants to talk after Ryan, you're welcome to do that. So go ahead, Ryan.
There we go. Am I good now?
You're good. Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I guess I'll just share a little bit. I feel like a broken record because I have been kind of just going over this for quite some time now, but a lot of it is the same of, you know, what Joanne was just talking about. And they're pretty, you know, pretty common and pretty obvious concerns and problems when you really just think about the dynamic of the childcare industry. So, you know, like Joanne was illustrating there, you know, two of the biggest problems happen to also be in direct conflict with one another, and that is, two of the largest and most important constituents in the field are the families, and whether or not they can afford quality care, and then of course the staff, and whether or not they have a living wage and proper compensation. And it's very difficult to try to please and both sides of that equation. And I know every childcare provider out there does their best and tries their best to do that, but naturally when you have one side of the equation, the families that are concerned about paying too much, and rightfully concerned that they're paying too much, and too much of their paycheck is going toward childcare. You obviously want to be able to lower that burden for them, but then on the other side of that, when you have less money coming in, you have the staff members that want to be fairly compensated and deserve to be compensated more than they currently are in this challenging field. So if you have less income coming in, then you have less room to give more out to the staff. So it's a very troubling dynamic there, and which is certainly one of the reasons that I stay involved in an organization like this with the ECCS, to try to figure out what we can do to try and help that dynamic, and figure out what kind of resources are out there. And there's a lot going on right now that is encouraging, as Merrill will probably talk about. There's a lot coming down the pipe with federal funding and state funding, but a lot of that is one-time grants and one-time funding. So it does a lot in the immediate short term to help show appreciation for the staff members, and compensate them for putting their health and safety on the line over the past year. And the challenge is going to continue to be, though, moving forward, that dynamic isn't going away, where you have the cost of childcare too much for families, and the pay for childcare workers too little for those staff members. So like I said, I'm kind of a broken record, always sharing this challenging dynamic whenever I can, to make people aware of it, and to see if there are ideas and strategies out there. It's just a very important message to get across, so hopefully down the road we do see some positive change.
Thank you, Ryan. Anyone else want to provide some insights before I hand it over to Merrill? Okay. Merrill, do you have slides to share?
I'm just going to talk.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, Merrill Gay is the Executive Director of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance. The Early Childhood Collaborative of Southington is a member of the Alliance, and I am also part of their steering committee. So Merrill and I work together frequently. So The floor is yours.
Okay. So a year ago, March, when schools shut down and childcare centers, many of them followed the public schools lead, just like they do with a snow day, and closed. Some stayed open, but many of them closed, not thinking this was maybe a week or two closure. Little did we all know. And very soon, providers started realizing, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. I remember hearing a provider who said, I used to take care of 5 kids who are the children of public school teachers. And then all of a sudden, none of them were bringing their kids because they weren't going to work. And my income dried up to 0. We started doing Zoom meetings with childcare providers across the state, and have been doing it since. Those started off with making sure that we were getting information out to providers, and then pretty quickly moved towards advocacy as we spoke with some of the national advocates who were telling us that Congress was considering some relief funds for early childhood. We put together a group of providers to meet with Rosa DeLauro, who was the, at that point, the chair of a subcommittee in appropriations. She's now the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives. We brought her together with providers from her district and helped her understand the real crisis that providers were going through. And that led her to introduce the Child Care's Essential Act, which would provide $50 billion for childcare. It didn't pass all at once. It passed in a couple of different bills, but the federal government has now committed $50 billion to support the childcare industry, which is frankly a remarkably large number. That said, it translates to Connecticut as 346 million. And of that, roughly half of it is for stabilization grants, and the other half is for the Care for Kids program. So even $176 million sounds like a lot of money until you understand that it is being spread out across 113,000 licensed childcare spots. So what it means is the providers are going to get a grant of somewhere between $650 and $1,000 per licensed spot. And that is to help them with the expenses, the unmet expenses from the pandemic. And, you know, there are certainly lots of providers who had to take out loans to be able to cover payroll while their enrollment was down. We are butting up against the feeling at the State House that, oh, well, the feds are giving you lots of money, you don't need any more money. When in reality, providers like Ryan are going to get grants that are equivalent of 2 to 4 weeks worth of revenue based on their licensed capacity. And that'll help to pay off the bills that accumulated during the pandemic. It's not something that enables you to give your staff a big pay raise, $1 an hour kind of pay raise. And providers also face the challenge that the minimum wage is going up in August and will go up again next year on the way to $15 an hour. Now, it is kind of depressing that the primary thing that is driving increases in wages in the early childhood field is an increase in minimum wage. We have long had this, what's known as a trilemma. If you're a parent, childcare is hard to find and it's really expensive. If you work in childcare, it's not a very lucrative industry to work in. All of that boils down to there's not enough money in the system because the money comes from the parents who are not at their peak earnings when they got little kids. Joanne talked about this is comparable to the cost of going to UConn. And if you're going to UConn, you've had 18 years to save for it, and there are loans you can take out. If you're talking about childcare, you are paying each week to pay for your care. And it is easily families' largest. If you've got 2 kids under 5, you can be paying more for childcare than you are for your mortgage. That's just, that's what it boils down to. So throughout this process, those of us at the Early Childhood Alliance have become much firmer believers that what we need is a much better system of supporting the early childhood system, a funding approach that puts more public dollars into childcare. The Care for Kids subsidy is one way that we subsidize childcare, and the federal government has put in has essentially added about 170 million to the system that is typically about 140 million a year in Connecticut. That is money that will get spread over 3 years. So it's not a doubling or more of the system, it's an increment. The governor has committed $50 million of that to increase the eligibility for Care for Kids, to allow parents who are in job training or education to be able to access the child care subsidy system. Up until now, you can only get Care for Kids if all adults in the household are working. And they have to be working at the same hours that your child is in care. So if you have one parent who's working first shift and another parent who's working second shift, you don't qualify for a child care subsidy during that first shift timeframe. It is right now only for families who are below 50% of state median income. The governor has announced that that will go up to 60% of state median income. There are a few other changes, one of which is to try and promote quality care. So the state is expanding the increase paid to providers who are using Care for Kids, who are accepting Care for Kids for programs that are accredited. And they are also supporting the accreditation process by paying all of the fees for accreditation and supporting coaches to help childcare providers become accredited through the National Association for the Education of Young Children.
Merrill, can I ask a quick question of you just related to what you just said? And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding properly in terms of thinking about our employees here in town. You had said if they're in education, in terms of, do they have to be teachers or could it be like para-educators, other things?
Actually, sorry, it's if they are in college or adult ed.
Okay, so it's not, okay.
Students, not teachers, yeah.
I think sometimes about our para-educators and others, custodial staff, food service workers, they're the wages they're getting and they have childcare challenges as well. And so that's where I go to the median income thing and who's eligible. That's what I was asking.
So the increase from 50% to 60% of state median income, there are a lot of people who are right there on that cusp. I've used the comparison. If you looked at the numbers of the Alice report versus the Care for Kids eligibility, we were saying you're eligible to get a child care subsidy just up to the point where you're earning enough to cover all of your costs except child care. And then we're saying, oh, now you earn too much money. We can't support your child care subsidy anymore. The increase in the income eligibility from 50 to 60% will help a bunch of those people who are right there on the cusp. And once you're on Care for Kids, you can remain on Care for Kids for a year, even if your income goes up over 60%, as long as it's not over 85% of state median income. So people have a little bit of transition time when they come off of this. But you've only got 106 families on Care for, or children on Care for Kids in Southington right now. And that could be because of eligibility issues of, one parent has lost a job and therefore they're no longer eligible. But as folks go back to work, Care for Kids could be a bigger role in paying the cost of childcare. At least for a couple of years.
When I think about our free reduced lunch population hovering around 24% out of 6,500 students, but only 100 with Care for Kids in terms of who might have younger siblings and against those who are enrolled in our schools, it doesn't add up in terms of maybe there are many who aren't accessing it for a lot of reasons, right? Either eligibility or awareness.
Right.
Right. And not just younger kids, also during the summer, the school age kids as well.
Yeah. So the school age kids during the summer is always when Care for Kids has the highest caseload. I think right now we're running at about 17,000 kids statewide. In the past, it's been as high as 23,000, I think. So You would expect that coming out of a time when childcare programs had closed temporarily and when lots of parents were out of work, that we would be at a low point, but we now are trying to rebuild that. As Joanne mentioned, the governor announced that the parent fees for Care for Kids would be waived from April through September. There is a provision in the state budget that would continue that until December. So that is, for families who are trying to go back to work, that could be pretty helpful initially.
And historically, the Care for Kid numbers here in Southington have not been high. I'm looking back, November of 2018, there were 81. March of 2017, there were 93. June of 2016, there were 121. So
yeah,
it's not there.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was a little bit about infant and toddler care, because that is typically where parents find it hardest to find care and where it is most expensive. And that is directly related to the fact that in a child care center, you can only have 4 kids for every adult. And that compared to preschool, where it's 1 to 10, that makes it more expensive care to provide. And so looking at the licensed capacity versus the number of children, it looks to me like Southington has got about 44 licensed infant toddler slots per 100 infants and toddlers. And compared to the state, statewide, we have about 28 licensed infant toddler slots per 100 children. So Southington is in a better place, but you would expect that with it being a pretty solidly middle class community. You've got lots of you compare to New Britain, we've got about 10 licensed infant toddler slots in New Britain per 100 children. But that's because very few families in New Britain can actually afford the cost of childcare. And so many more are reliant on subsidized care of one form or another. So this week, we expect that the legislature will take up a bill that would make the governor's announcement about providing care to families who are in education or training programs, make that possible. That's, if anybody is paying attention, House Bill 6558. It also has a provision to allow family child care centers to open up, or family child care programs to open up in a business incubator model in a few communities as a pilot, and a task force around addressing the future workforce needs of the child care industry. It is hard to get students who are thinking about careers to say, I'm going to go the early childhood track, because unless they're working in a public school system, it's pretty clear it's not going to be a very lucrative field over time. To address that issue, the only solution is to figure out another source of revenue for childcare programs besides parents, because it doesn't look like there's ever going to be a way in which parents are earning enough for childcare providers to be, making anything close to what a kindergarten teacher makes. If you look at some places like the state of Alabama has a state preschool program where they pay the preschool teachers at the same rate as kindergarten teachers. In Connecticut, preschool teachers are making somewhere in the $28,000 to $35,000 range based on their education level, where kindergarten teachers start at about 48, I think. So you got a big gap there. So looking towards the future, the president's proposal of an American Families Act would put a lot more money into childcare. That is by no means a done deal. Congress is very closely divided, and no one knows whether that's actually going to pass. Additional, there at this point are not any proposals in Connecticut to put more state dollars into childcare that are being considered in this state legislative session. But that there clearly is a growing group of people who are looking at how do we create a more robust early childcare system in Connecticut. A coalition of groups called Reimagining Childcare has sort of started to coalesce, and I hope we'll be working around the state over the next 6 months or so to convene lots of parents and talk about what do we want to see as a future childcare system, and then engaging childcare providers as well to talk about, so how do we want this to look? I know that childcare providers in many parts of the state kind of live in terror that the public school system is going to like grab all the preschool kids and put them out of business, kind of eat their lunch. So, I think
I suspect that Steve is worried about the opposite.
Yeah, that the community preschool programs are going to grab all of the preschoolers from the public schools?
No, that the concept of universal preschool being completely with the school district.
Okay. So I think that the logistics of that probably make it impossible, because public schools don't have the space to all of a sudden take in 2 more grades worth of kids. The Smart Start program that Commissioner Bai supported when she was a state senator, the idea was to incentivize communities to turn their empty classrooms into pre-K classrooms by sort of giving them, I think it was $75,000 per classroom to do that. It didn't have a huge uptake because there weren't that many school districts that had empty classrooms that were willing to do the cost sharing side of that, because that might pay for the teacher, but it won't pay for the aide, won't pay for the busing, all that sort of stuff. And so I understand that, I know that our superintendent is always looking for new places that we could provide preschool, but knows very clearly we couldn't do that. We couldn't all of a sudden provide 2 new grades worth of kids in public school buildings. It's not going to happen. So I think that if there is a move towards universal preschool, certainly our Early Childhood Alliance and the community providers would all be pushing for a mixed delivery system where school districts would be connected to those community providers, but a lot of the preschool would actually be going on in community provider settings.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yesterday evening, I had presented to our town council some scenarios relative to the renovation or construction of our final 3 elementary schools, if you will, that have yet to be addressed over the years. And I was worried about it being short-sighted, if you will, in terms of, okay, we're doing work on 3 schools, and then we're finishing with the work in a couple of years here, and then the universal preschool mandate comes out, and the community thinking, why didn't we know about this or see this ahead of time? And so I was just, I had messaged Joanne, like, any insight would be helpful here, because I don't want to be short-sighted and miss the ball if that's something that's coming down the pike. But I agree with you completely. Given the current square footage of our buildings, there would be absolutely no way in the occupancy rate that we could infuse 3 and 4-year-olds in universally.
Not to mention it would put out of business, Village Green Nursery School, Zion Lutheran Nursery School. It would impact programs like the Y and like Ryan's, because then they would only be caring for the infants and toddlers, the more expensive, like loss leader type of role, and not have the 3 and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds.
Yep. I mean, it's very clear that most infant toddler care is internally subsidized by the preschool program that accompanies it.
Sure. And given that they really never mandated full day kindergarten, even because of the same type of scenario, I doubt if we would get to universal preschool before mandating full day kindergarten.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if anybody has questions, I think I pretty much said what I wanted to say, that we will see in the fall whether Congress is able to pass anything that will provide a new revenue stream for childcare. And, it really depends on Joe Manchin in the Senate, to be quite honest. We'll find out.
So thank you, Merrill, for sharing all of those insights. And certainly as advocacy opportunities come up, I help share that, collect the information from the Alliance, share it out to the childcare providers and out on our social media pages. So that way it can help increase the voice that's going out from an advocacy standpoint.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
So kind of returning to our strategic plan output. Again, this is pre-pandemic. Our goals were kindergarten readiness with a new emphasis on a couple of different areas, health and safety with a new emphasis on mental health, access to quality childcare, and then organizational sustainability was something that we needed to work on internally. And so we continue to do that through outreach, education, and advocacy. On the outreach side, pre-pandemic and moving forward, I'm at events. If anybody is going to be at the Southington Pride Youth and Family Festival on Saturday, I will be there with a couple of board members. I'm active with a number of community organizations, the Chamber, Activate Southington, Behavioral Health Stakeholders Group, the Interfaith Clergy Association. We've provided books and math kits for the incoming kindergarten students, books to Southington Community Services, and Sierra and I are on social media all the time. And the number of phone calls and direct emails that I've been getting from parents has really increased over the last several months. So that's been good to see. One thing we did during the pandemic, because people were not getting out as much, is we got some funding to pay for signs. So we had signs on the town green. I've got lawn signs up all over town, including on some of the elementary school properties. Thank you, Steve. On our education front, during the pandemic, I started weekly and now it's bi-weekly calls for the childcare providers. A lot of what I do is collect the information I get from the Alliance's calls and pass it on, because that way, like all of them didn't have to be on the Alliance calls at the same time. I've also been doing virtual office hours for parents. Those will continue through the end of June. And then I will switch to being at the farmer's market. We've done webinars on ruler emotional intelligence for parents and childcare providers. We've had webinars for providers about mental health upon return to school. That happened over the summer. I've participated in the kindergarten info sessions. Our website has grown with lots of content and lots of social media education as well. A plug for the helmet law, which is not really new, but I still see kids riding around under the age of 16 on skateboards and scooters who are not wearing helmets. So that was part of our signage that went out. Right there. Advocacy. as I mentioned before, doing a lot of work on the federal, state, and local level. I did host a screening of the No Small Matters movie. And then we had a community discussion. So Steve was part of that conversation. So if anybody wants to borrow this movie, you are welcome to do that. And if you go to that website, which Sierra should be putting in the chat box, there's a summary of the conversation we had and some of the output of that. And so we're a member of a number of organizations to help with advocacy and connecting people and learning about what's happening.
And Joanne, if I could just a plug for that movie for folks who are interested in a lot of what Merrill was just talking about, kind of that, I forget the exact term he used, but the triangle or the triad, if you will, of challenges relative to childcare is, you know, the wages of the workers against the seats that are available, against the income challenges of families. I thought the movie touched upon that very well and kind of highlights the conundrum that we all have. And so for folks that might have an ear to bend, if you will, somewhere within our legislative bodies, that would help to inform a lot of what you might want to bring to their attention and hopefully advance this cause maybe in a fall legislative session.
Yeah, and I think that movie is also available through a couple of streaming services. So one thing that I was able to do thanks to the funding from the Barnes Trust through the Main Street Community Foundation was I was able to connect the Connecticut Diaper Bank with Southington Community Services. We had some funding that we couldn't spend as planned. And so Kate said, you know, can you spend it on diapers? And so I was able to reach out to Janet Alfonso, who happens to live here in Southington. But the Connecticut Diaper Bank had never done any work here because of their funding. And I was able to buy diapers through her for her cost. And so those are 2 pallets of diapers that got delivered to Southington Community Services. And during the height of the pandemic, SOCA, the Southington Community Cultural Arts Center, had thank you signs up along their window thanking essential workers. And when I drove by, I'm like, where are the childcare providers? So I called Mary and I said, can you make another sign and put one up? Because childcare workers are essential workers as well. So it was a good reminder for the folks in the town. Some of the new initiatives, some of this comes from funding that we're required to do, and some of it is something that we're planning on. Our Parent Ambassador Program. We will be doing a parent survey and some focus groups. So I, as of yesterday, now have money to pay for a consultant to help do that. So I'll be reaching out to many of you to see if there's specific questions you want us to ask parents of young children. We plan to roll out the Sparkler app, which is something that the Office of Early Childhood has announced. It's basically a mobile app for parents to do developmental screening, and then it provides activities that they can do with their children. And if an issue is identified, the children are not developing appropriately, it will refer them to resources like the Birth to 3 program. And in the first Chamber of Commerce newspaper, which should be coming out in June, you'll see an ad from the Early Childhood Collaborative. So if you know of anybody who needs a resource about anything related to raising young children in school, we still have our resource directory on our website. There is a section specifically for, excuse me, mental health support. So lots of information here. And so we are right at the 9:30 mark. But I welcome anybody who can stay to hang out with us for a few more minutes because we'd love to know your thoughts. If there's any other needs that there are in the community, what else we can do. If you need to leave, I understand that because we did go right until the end. You can always follow up with me later, but any comments are welcome.
Joanne, I have to apologize. I do have to jump off, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to thank you for your advocacy for kids in our community during this past year. I know you and I touched base, throughout, and, I know you worked closely with all the child care providers, nursery schools, as information was coming in. It was a pretty fluid situation for what the rules were going to be and the guidelines and the protocols, and you were right there. And it's kind of funny. I've been in town not too many years now, but long enough to just see how people assimilate themselves to one another. And Mr. Connellan's wife, Terry, is known as the picture lady in town. And we've joked that more people knew Terry than Tim when he took the superintendency. I knew you as Tim Johnson's wife when I first got to Southington because of, being the principal at Kennedy and Mr. Johnson being the showman that he is. But I think in a short amount of time here, people are going to start to say Tim Johnson is the early childhood lady's husband because you're out and about and you're doing tireless work. And it's just much appreciated. So I just wanted to give you a public shout out with this group, especially because I know you guys partner well together. And just want to also wish everyone else good luck for the remainder of the year. And if there's anything we can do in the school system, you're welcome to reach out to us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, everyone.
Anyone else? What else can we do? What are we missing?
Joanne, I have to jump off too, but I just kind of want to echo what Steve was saying. I'm thank you for everything that you've been doing over this year plus. It's been trying on all of us, but you've handled it with such grace. So thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you. And Barbara, I have to say, I was so excited to get that grant
I know,
yesterday.
you and me both. I think everyone, I heard like a sounding cry when I saw that, just huzzah. So yeah.
Yeah, when the email shows up and it says, you have been fully funded. I'm like,
yeah, we've all been waiting. So it's long awaited. And I know it's going to go to good use. I'm really excited to see what you and everyone else comes up with. So thank you once again.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, take care.
Anyone else have anything?
Joanne, I just want to thank you, your board, and all of your work. I think it's tremendous. I'm hopeful that next year we can host you for an annual meeting in person once again. It was great to have everybody in person. But you mentioned the survey that you're going to be, doing in the near future, and would love to see if we can have some kind of questions around food insecurity as part of that survey, and just see, how families are doing, with food security.
Of course.
Great, thank you.
Sierra, make sure that's on our notes. Anyone else? Do I see Val trying to come off of mute?
Yes, hey, Joanne. I just really wanted to echo what everybody's saying. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, your board is doing. And this was really enlightening. So it's just really, it's really good for us to see, at the council level, the needs and, what's going on and maybe what's coming down the pike. So yeah, just very, very glad that I was able to join, and I'll stay in touch with you, obviously, but thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Joanne, I'd like to thank you too. This was my first meeting and it was really interesting. So I just want to offer too, if there's anything the police department can do, this was a learning experience for me. So I'll be trying to attend most of the meetings just so I can raise my awareness in this area. But if there's something that we can do, we can partner with, by all means, please reach out to us, because there's absolutely nothing more than important than our kids. The talks we do in school now, we tell people they're our future and they're the ones that are going to straighten out what's going on in this world. So whatever you can do, whatever you need, let me know and we'll work towards making that happen.
Okay. I'm looking forward to when we can partner on another car seat safety clinic.
Absolutely.
we had been doing those twice a year before the pandemic, and there's probably a pent-up need for parents needing to double check, as kids grow so fast and so many are being born every year. So
Absolutely.
okay, then if there's nothing else moving forward, so how can you support us? If you know a young family, tell them about us, send them our way. We accept donations. You can volunteer. We are looking for board members. We're especially looking to increase the diversity of our board in a variety of ways. When I first started, the entire ECCS board had some sort of early childhood connection, whether it was Board of Ed members or owners of programs. We now have businesses involved on the board. We now have men on our board, but we need to add more board members. If you're not liking us on social media, please do that. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And continue to participate in our events and fundraisers, which are always posted on our website and on social media. And so if you have any questions, you are always welcome to reach out to me. That's all my contact info. It's also in all of the emails that you get from me. So I want to thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for joining me early. Donna, I do look forward to being able to do this again in person.
Yes.
For breakfast.
Next year.
I'm like, we're not quite at that point yet, but hopefully next year we can do it in person.
Yes.
So I'm willing to stay on and chat if anybody has anything else to share, but again, thank you everybody for your time this morning.
I'm still here, Joanne. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, we got 7 people still on.
All right. As a board member, I was very concerned about the numbers, the small numbers of families that are receiving care for kids. Is that opportunity so difficult that parents can't do it on their own, or is it just a lack of knowledge that the program's available, especially for summer camps?
I think it's a combination of lack of knowledge, and every once in a while I put out a push that, the Care for Kids is out there. Embarrassment about wanting to claim that they need help. Especially in Southington, I suspect that there are quite a few families who make too much. And this increase from 50 to 60% is really going to help them. The income limits of the state median income. And not all childcare providers in town accept Care for Kids.
How about the summer camp people? Do they all accept Care for Kids?
They do not all accept Care for Kids. Camp Sloper does not accept Care for Kids, but their program, the camp, I never know how to say it. Nagasaki?
No, but close.
Anyway, the camp that they have, that they run at the building on Main Street, which is for ages 3 through 5th grade, that one does accept Care for Kids. I believe that Leadership Martial Arts and Fast Camp accept Care for Kids. I don't know if Camp Corp does. They're brand new. I don't know if they've gotten their paperwork in yet. So there are definitely camp options for that. And Slopers does offer other financial aid if needed, and they have scholarships.
How do parents apply for that?
You go out to the Care for Kids website. There's a screening tool where you put in the number of people in your family and your income, and it will tell you whether or not you are eligible. So that really helps. And then there's a application process, which may also be what turns people off to applying, where you have to provide a lot of financial information to prove that you're eligible.
So
It's a
there,
lengthy process. It's definitely challenging and often requires a lot of help and coordination with the providers if the providers are willing and have the time to help with the process. So yeah, I'm sure that is part of the holdup many times is it's not a straightforward or easy process by any means.
is there anyone in town who can help parents with that process? Do we have any town agencies, for instance, that could help folks with that process?
I know that Southington Community Services helps with many other application processes, like if you need WIC or SNAP. I don't know. I'll have to ask Janet if Southington Community Services helps with the Care for Kids application.
Thank you.
Hi, Angela.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. I was just typing in the chat, but I'll just tell you, I had to miss some pieces of this because I had patients, and I'm wondering if the PowerPoint will be available for me to share with my staff and Dr. George.
So not only the PowerPoint, but we are recording this, and the recording will be available as well.
Perfect. Wonderful. And the other thing I wanted to say is I'm so excited that you have the resilience video. I think that's amazing. I used to show it to my students at UConn, and I actually think I'm going to borrow it when no one else is using it so I can show the staff here as well. It's amazing. Excellent. And so important.
Great. You're certainly welcome to it. So
okay, thanks.
And we are still recording. Okay. Anything else? Well, then, thank you, everybody.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. And to everyone who was participating in this meeting.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.